Break down why people do not heal at the same rates, because I see this not infrequently where two people might have rheumatoid arthritis or acid reflux or adrenal fatigue, you name it, and they'll see someone else who had the same label, the same symptoms, and they'll say, "Oh, this person healed in X amount of time. I'm not healed in X amount of time. What's going on?" So it's logical. I get that. But there's always a reason, right? And I keep saying, like, as these protocols, they work across the board. The only way they don't work is if you just give up. That's how the medical medium toolbox is. Like, you might have to do more protocols for a longer period of time than someone else, but that's the reality of it. So what makes it different? Why does one person with the same label heal in 6 months and another person might take 18 months, for example? It comes down to a medical medium. He talks about this, Anthony William, he talks about this, like everyone has their own unique brew, which is a nice way of saying everyone's filled with slightly different variations of the same junk. Okay, so it comes down to toxins. We're mostly talking about heavy metals and pathogens. So there are numerous amounts of pathogens, and same thing with toxins and heavy metals. There's plenty of them out there. There's more and more each passing year. So here's one interesting way to think about this. There are over 60 varieties of Epstein-Barr. So if we just took just Epstein-Barr, we didn't count strep bacteria, we didn't count shingles virus, HHV6, all the other HHVs, all the other viruses and bad bacteria that people are walking around with, we just took 60 strains for the number of strains of Epstein-Barr, and we just took 10 toxic heavy metals, just 10 of them. There's way more than that. And we did some quick and dirty math using like some power sets here to figure out how many possible combinations are there out of 60 strains of Epstein-Barr and 10 toxic heavy metals. Do you know what that number is? It's like in the sextillions, which means 1,000 million possible combinations. So that's why no two people are going to have the exact same, no two people have the exact same symptoms, and no two people have the exact same healing timeline or progression. That's why, because it just produces like this almost infinite number of different presentations person to person. So let's break down toxins a bit more. So toxins like heavy metals, DDT, mercury, aluminum, copper, lead, arsenic, cadmium, barium, there's a lot of them. Some get passed down generations to generations. So everyone who's alive watching this video was born with some amount of toxic heavy metals that your parents were exposed to and or your grandparents were exposed to, and so on and so forth. So some people have a higher amount of these generational older toxins, while others have less. Some people have newer toxic exposures than others. And even within this toxic group, these toxic heavy metals, they can form alloys. So a common one that is talked about is mercury can combine with aluminum or fuse with it and create this alloy. It's not just mercury and it's not just aluminum, it's a combination. And there can be different ratios within that. And that's its own separate toxin, right? Another factor to consider is how much oxidation of these toxic heavy metals is happening in someone's body. And oxidation basically means that a toxic heavy metal, let's say you have high amount of mercury in the brain, oxidation just happens over time, and especially with like a high fat diet, and that metal just starts to rust and it bleeds off and it spreads out into surrounding tissue. So that's another factor within the heavy metals. Something else to consider is these heavy metals can settle in slightly different areas of the brain and the liver and the gut and all over the body. And those can produce a different set of circumstances as well. So there's layers upon layers upon layers of things that ultimately determine, the state of somebody's internal environment, right? And then with pathogens, the big ones, the big troublemakers we're talking about, viruses, bad bacteria. Those, when we're talking about pathogens, those are the big ones that cause the vast majority of health issues today. And within that, there are multiple strains of every type of virus and every type of bad bacteria. And that number, as I mentioned before, that number of mutations and strains and varieties continues to grow and grow. And some of those strains or varieties are more aggressive than others. And you can have multiple strains at the same time. Some person might have one strain of Epstein-Barr. Another person might have 5 strains of Epstein-Barr, plus shingles, plus HHV6, plus CMV. And these combinations just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So again, this all is explaining why people have different healing timelines. Another thing to consider with pathogens is, are they resistant? Especially when we're talking about something like strep bacteria. How much antibiotics has somebody taken in their lifetime? Because that leads to more resistant strains of strep. They're harder to kill. It can still be done, but that's going to play a factor as well. And then, as if all that was not enough to take into consideration, we have other factors on top of that. We have the length of time. How long has somebody had these toxins or pathogens in their body, right? If they've been rooting around for quite some time and they've built up their numbers, that's going to be harder to fight off versus something that's much newer to the body. Stress, always a factor. If somebody has had a lot of stress or is currently going through a lot of stress, that releases those stress hormones, and pathogens can pick up that signal and they can feed off that. And, that weakens the immune system. It allows for these bugs to flare up. So that's going to be different person to person. How much stress is in that person's life? What type of environment is somebody in? Is somebody in an environment where they're totally protected from exposures to new pathogens and new toxins? Or are they someone who, because of where they work, they're constantly exposed to chemical scents, for example, or they're working with sick people, so they're constantly exposed to new bugs? That's going to play a role for sure. What has a person's diet been like leading up to the point where they started to do the right things in order to heal? Is somebody coming from more of just kind of a standard diet where, you just try to limit junk food, but, you're still eating some junk food, you still eat some fast food, you still eat some fried food, still eat food chemicals, things like that? Or have you at least cleaned up your diet from those foods for years and years before you started down this road? Are you someone who's been eating fruit before you did this type of work? That's going to be useful. So everyone's starting from different starting places as well. And then another factor, how many protocols have you done, right? Like I notice this a lot, that people, when they start this healing process, is they almost have they give themselves like an amount, or they set this they have this bar of like, oh, I think I'll do X, Y, and Z protocols, and I expect that to give me X, Y, Z result. And if it doesn't, they can be disappointed. But then we have to go through, well, there's no cookie cutter one size fits all of if everyone who has this symptom just does this, then that's going to take care of that. And that's why I made this video, is because I wanted to share the different reasons why people have different healing timelines. So a lot of people just need to continue doing more and more protocols and get to some deeper levels of healing. Some people can heal with less amount of protocols, for sure. And again, it's dependent on these factors and the ones above it. But if you're not to a place where you're happy, you need to do more of the protocols. You have to keep kind of doubling down and doing more and more. And then at the end of the day, there's this huge subjective component. And what I mean by that is like, what's your measure of success? Like, how are you going to determine when you are happy with your healing? Because there is no like magic definitive line, right? Now you could say like, well, I want to see X, Y, and Z on a test, and even those are faulty. But yeah, there are lots of situations where you can kind of use that as a measure of success. Certainly, that's there. But, some people come in, and I've seen and I've known of lots of people who get great improvement in like 60, 70, 80, 90, 95% of their symptoms. But because it wasn't fully 100%, they said this doesn't work. Now, for me, that's a huge mistake because, if you get something to where it's 60, 70, 80%, 95% better, that's great. That's at the very least, that's a great start, and you need to continue. But some people have these expectations some people also believe that like, hey, I should do something for a period of time, and then, I should be able to go back to old habits, let's say, and maybe eat some foods that feed pathogens, or, put myself in situations where I'm exposed to toxins, and I should be bulletproof, right? That's not the reality for most situations. If you have a standard of absolute perfection that is unshakable, that you'll never feel sick again, you'll never have a negative symptom health-wise, I've got some bad news. Unfortunately, in today's world, that's probably not realistic. So someone like a glass half full kind of person, and they're just joyous and grateful that, hey, 60, 70, 80, 90, 95% of my symptoms are like gone or way, way better. Like, that's amazing. If so, like, that's great. And then you can just kind of figure out where you want to settle after that. But if you're someone who's like, and by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong for like wanting to be bulletproof, but I think there has to be a measure of realism here that like, that's probably not going to happen for the rest of your life, right? Like, you're not going to you can't just walk away, and especially go back to old habits that kind of led you to where you are in this place, and expect to never have any negative repercussions again. It's great to always strive for 100% in health. I think that's fine, as long as it fits your lifestyle and your situation and those people around you, and you can make that work. Fantastic. That's wonderful. But yeah, so there's the whole point of this is there are so many reasons why people are going to take different amounts of time to heal, but based on, I think, a combination of people being let down so many times by things in the past that they thought would heal them, and kind of how we were all brought up in that medical pharmaceutical model of like, you should just feel like you should be able to take something quick, a quick remedy, quick procedure, and all your problems should be gone. That was kind of the allure or the promise, spoken or unspoken, of that model. That we have to like kind of change how we look at things, and we have to really appreciate what's in front of us and what we are able to do. And if you can do that, then you can just take this as far as you want to take it. And if you want to try to take it to 100%, that's what you're going to do. And you'll get as close to that as you can. If you're happy being at 90%, that's great. Most people never even make any headway in their healing whatsoever. So you're playing with house money. That's fantastic. But, don't be hard on yourself, and really just kind of, if you can wrap your mind around the idea of like, this is what's going on inside my body. This is what happens in one way, shape, form, or another in everyone's body who has a chronic illness. These are the protocols that help to cleanse out these root causes. Then it always just comes down to a matter of how many protocols are you willing and able to implement? And at what speed are you willing and able to implement them? And then from there, it's just kind of blinders on, focus, implement protocols, and continue to reap the rewards. And I say this all the time, like healing will happen. Healing is possible. Healing happens all day, every day. It just doesn't look how you thought it was going to look. it's going to be different. It's not you just cutting out, processed junk food and taking 20 supplements. It's not going to look like that. It's not always going to go in a straight line, but it will happen absolutely. So hang in there. You got this.